Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast? Please subscribe, leave a review, comment, share, and consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, even at the producer and sponsorship levels. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Devon Chulick about creating and maintaining company culture through play. Devon Chulick, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it is a pleasure to be with you today. I am super excited to be talking about play and gaming. We're going to be talking about the ways that we can create and maintain company culture through play. And that's really what your company is all about. As we get started, I wanted to share Devon's bio with everybody. Devon Chulick has dedicated the last 15 years of his career to building communities and building innovative e-commerce products and experiences. As a founder of former Haight Street Gallery and print shop DSF, he helped organize monthly art walks, activated plans to beautify the neighborhood, and served as the president of the Lower Haight Merchant Neighborhood Association. In the world of e-commerce, he has worked on product teams for brands such as Chubbies, Everlane, and Dolls Kill. He continues to consult for a number of SMBs and VCs, and in 2020, he co-founded Start Playing, a Y Combinator-backed startup that connects gamers and aims to dismantle the gatekeeping commonly associated with the community. He has worked as a creator in the gaming and art space and has been featured by publications such as Bloomberg or Marketplace, SF Gate, WGN News, and many others. It's a pleasure to have you, Devon. Anything else you would like to share with listeners by way of your background and personal context before we dive in?
That was plenty. I remembered some things I forgot about myself. Oh my goodness.
No, that's wonderful. You have a tremendous background, and I like the community aspects of your background, coupled with your corporate experiences. I think all of that's fantastic. So why don't we start by talking about gaming, and specifically as we talk about play and gaming, describe for us what does that look like at Start Playing? What types of activities in gaming and play are you involved with, and do you work with organizations on?
Yeah, so we're a gaming company, right? So that's the first thing about Start Playing is, playfulness and playing is part of every aspect. In how we're playful in how we name our CX team. We're playful in how we name a lot of our internal documents. But the whole goal of our company is to get people in these communities through play, and we build communities through play, and it's really impactful when you hear that. And so we do the same thing with our teams. It's funny. We actually get together quite often just to play games as a team, and using our own product together too. Our product is like the Airbnb of gaming for tabletop. So we use it to book games with each other as a group. To remind ourselves that this is, these are the communities we're building, and this is how impactful it is.
So tell me more about tabletop gaming, kind of that mentality, that approach, as opposed to say other types of gaming people may be thinking about as they're listening.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of times when we think gaming, we think mobile games, video games, things like that. And then when people hear tabletop, they kind of think board games, but tabletop is, tabletop role-playing games are things like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu. And there's a reason why these games not only are so sticky, and why people they're so infectious and the hobby is so rabid is because I want you and everyone that's listening to this to think about, when do you use your imagination? right? We use our imagination for problem solving at work, or probably reading something, right? And so very rarely do we use our imagination for leisure time anymore. Now, think about when you use your imagination with other contemporaries. When was the last time you were with a bunch of your friends and you all use your imagination together? I can't, it's so hard to think about something that we do as adults where we use our imagination with our friends, and we just don't do it. And that's one of the things that is very part of tabletop gaming. And so when you get the chance to sit down with others and you use your imagination together and you're telling a collective story, there's nothing else quite like it. And so I always see people the first time they play, something happens. There's like a switch that kind of flips, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Because there's no other pastime like it.
Well, and maybe that speaks to really my next question, and that is, this market for tabletop gaming generally, and not even connected with the workspace in the workplace in any way, but the market for tabletop gaming is growing so quickly, and the popularity is increasing. You have all these Euro games, for example. You mentioned Dungeons and Dragons and others such games. You have shows like Netflix Stranger Things, which is repopularizing Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. So tell us more about really the popularity of tabletop gaming, and then we can get more into like how you are utilizing it in creating community, creating culture within teams and organizations.
Yeah. So when you think about, if we think about millennials, which is one of the biggest buying, segments out there, we grew up with Harry Potter books, and we grew up with the Lord of the Rings movies. We grew up with this escapism of fantasy and these kind of other realms. And so it's part of our nostalgia and our identity. So when we see, these games and stuff and Stranger Things, it also reminds us of Freaks and Geeks. And so all of the media that we've consumed as younger has kind of led us to having an interest in these other, look how big Game of Thrones was, and so there's this interest in escapism. And of course, like, the world is very bleak sometimes. And so escapism really helps you connect with people and through your imagination. And so I feel a lot of the growth that we're seeing is people want something else to spend their leisure time on, and they want to stay connected, and they want to be around people. And gaming is just one way to do that.
It's awesome to think about how we can connect with people, and just, I'm not a big gamer myself. I never really have been, but over the 4th of July weekend, I'm getting together, this past weekend with all my family, extended family. We're spending time together, and gaming is a nice way to just connect with people. And in some ways it lowers the stakes too, when you're with in-laws and other family members that maybe you don't interact with that much. Maybe it can be a little awkward at times in terms of just spending time together, hanging out and whatever, but you start playing a game and you're laughing, you're having fun, you're interacting in genuine and authentic ways without it feeling strained, right? And all of that, so in that sense, maybe, even think of it as like a social lubricant of sorts. And it really can help facilitate, just good connection. And I love that aspect of games. And so I'll probably never be, like a big avid gamer, like many of the gaming hobbyists that are out there, but I totally recognize the value of it. And I do enjoy playing with people, especially when I see it as a way to form and, forge those connections. Go ahead.
It's we see a lot of very interesting things happen because we do a lot of corporate gaming, and companies will like hire us like, hey, we got a team of 50 people. We'd love to do, an adventure. We'd love to do some sort of game. And, teams are looking for ways to connect remotely because that's we live in a remote workplace now. And so that's one of the things we do. And when we get these teams together, a lot of these people have never played a tabletop game. They've never played Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that. So it's the first time. But they're able to kind of get away from work, but they're still with their peers. And there is something that when you're playing this game is like a 2-hour to 3-hour game usually, but it's all decided by the people playing. So you're going to use your imagination with your coworkers. And what we're noticing is they leave that game with so much to talk about between each other. And what I've kind of researched, like what's really good for team activities is when you can create inside jokes and memories that people reference. That's kind of like, that's the chef kiss of team building events. And like, like fun things to do is if an inside joke is created and people reference it, that means that it was successful. And that's the number one thing that comes out of these type of games.
Yeah. The enduring connections that last beyond the day that you're playing, and you reference it weeks, months, even years later. And, that's, again, coming back to family. I know you're talking about corporate, but coming back to family, that's when you're gathering around with your family and your siblings, years later and reminiscing on the weird things that you did when you were teenagers or whatever. And really that same or a similar dynamic can emerge in a really tight knit team. In the workplace. And as you learn to trust each other, as you learn to develop authentic relationships with each other, as you learn, that you actually want to like be around members of your team at work, spend time with them. And it doesn't necessarily even mean, depending on your life stage, you may or may not have time outside of work to get together. Maybe you don't have time or the ability to go grab a drink after work or to do those sorts of things. But when you can have those connections where you get up in the morning and you're like, yeah, I'm not only, happy to show up to work today, but I'm excited to see this person and this person. I'm excited to work with them and collaborate with them and such. And you
always need a best friend at work. You always need a best friend at work.
Yeah. You have a best friend at work. You have people that you can lean on, people that you can encourage, and they can encourage you. And so much of that can happen through the cooperative gaming, through just the state of play. And the other aspect that you've mentioned a couple times already is just the generating of creativity. Those juices get flowing, and then that enables you to unlock different parts of your brain, so that when you go back to work, you are more innovative and creative, and you can hit your flow state and just be more productive. And so sometimes people think, well, man, why are you're wasting an hour of like doing this team gaming activity? Why, that's, say you have 5-6 people on your team, that's 6 hours opportunity cost, lost time productivity.
Yep.
Like, well, maybe, but more likely is that it'll be that investment in time is well worth it, because it's going to, or if it's done correctly, if it's done well, it's going to produce better integration and synthesis and creativity and all those sorts of things that it's hard to measure, but you know it when you see it, and ultimately that's far more important than a few hours here and there.
Do you know that there's this thing when we watch things on television or movies or things like that our brain thinks it's happening to us. That's why like we get scared when we watch horror movies, right? So our brain, when anything is consumed, we think it's happening to us. But also when you play games, it's a little bit different because it's not passive, right? It's interactive. You are engaging in it. And the other thing is, when you are engaging with it, you are also generating new experiences. And when it's something like these games where you have to like pretend like, hey, we're out in like the enchanted forest trying to find the evil wizard, right? That right there it's such a wholly new experience that a lot of people don't have, that when you're sharing that with a team, friends, family, whatever, it is highly memorable because you don't have those memories. You don't have things like that. So you're generating this. And that is like some of the most important and like kind of positive things for a person, because the more new experiences we have, the not only younger we feel, but we also create more connections through that.
Yeah. And again, those connections are what bind and keep teams tightly knit and working well together. And, I do a lot of work in the employee satisfaction, engagement, and motivation space, a lot of research there. And there's a lot of things that motivate people, that are salient drivers and can engage people or disengage people. And, we have a variety of intrinsic and extrinsic factors that play into that. Most often we think about pay. We know that pay is important. You have to have adequate pay. But more often than not, what really gets people energized and excited about going to work, research has shown, my own research, but lots of other people's research as well, has shown over and over and over again that it's about the relationships of the people that you work with. You could work in really a pretty crummy company, not even, maybe making even a little bit below market. The culture's not terribly healthy. Like you could list off a whole bunch of fairly negative things.
Yeah.
But if your boss is awesome and you love your boss and you have good people on your team that you love working with, that essentially creates an insulated bubble around you and your experience at work. And all of a sudden, even with all the other tumult happening outside of your team, and in the politics and the strife and the frustrations and stuff, you're more or less, you can be insulated from that if you have a good team. And so, the value of it. Now, certainly we want to have healthy organizations with healthy cultures, and we want, all of that, we want that as well. But what I'm saying is, hopefully, I think people can see this as empowering. That if you're a manager of a team, you still have a sphere of influence that you have quite a bit of control over. You can create the environment for your team, even within, a broader environment that may or may not be as positive or healthy as you'd want it to be. And so let's take ownership over our sphere of influence and let's make it the best it can possibly be. And this is one way to really enhance that, to really create a better environment. And it could be something as simple as, you can have workshops and you can have retreats and you can do those sorts of things, but you can also just have like a lunch hour, game time, bring your lunch, let's play for an hour. And people should be taking a lunchtime anyways. If they're not, that's another problem.
1,000%.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Like if you think about when you ask people about previous places they worked, right? I can't remember anyone that's ever said, it was wonderful, they paid me so much. I don't really hear that. We like, and it could be just for the fact that we're Americans and we don't really talk about wages that much. But I feel that the number one thing I always hear from people, if they had a great experience where they worked, was the people were great. I rarely hear, the mentorship was awesome. The internal education tools were incredible. It was first, the team was great. The people were amazing. That's why I liked working there. And then the next thing is I learned a lot, which meant like, it wasn't a great place, but I learned what I don't want out of a workplace. And those are the big things that I always hear that are kind of big indicators of what a workplace was like.
Yeah. And I agree. That's consistent with my personal experience when I talk to other people, as well as the research that I've done. Tell us more about your platform and how it has impacted users over time and how it can be utilized.
Yeah. So I mean, like the companies that come in and game with us now, we have a lot that are doing this every month now as like a team game. And it's great because they're essentially getting to write their own stories and their own adventures. And it's so exciting to see how exciting they are every week. But on a larger scale, we are hearing these people, they come as individuals looking for a game, and they come and they use our service, and we have our host, our game masters, our dungeon masters that they end up joining a game with, and they're joining a game with a bunch of other people that are joining solo. But within a few weeks, that group are fast friends. And then, after a year, we're hearing stories of like, oh yeah, I went to, this one's other player's wedding, because all these games are online. So these people are creating these intense friendships, and they're now, sending each other Christmas presents, going to each other's weddings. We're hearing about this group of 5th grade girls that they play a game every other week on the site with a game master, a dungeon master, Katie. And we heard that all those girls, their moms now do a monthly game on the site. And it's like the mom and wine D&D night. And all these people finding ways that they want to get together, they want to spend time, and they want to connect. And this is one of those things that makes it fun and makes it memorable, and doesn't kind of give you this huge Zoom fatigue.
Yeah. And that Zoom fatigue is real. And so we need to be careful about it. And you've already mentioned, in relation to Zoom, you've mentioned how this can be utilized both in, a in-person workplace, but virtual, remote work environment, hybrid environment, when you have distributed teams all over the place. This is a way that you can connect people. And so I think all of that is fantastic as we think about the future of work, the future of distributed teams, remote and hybrid teams, and those sorts of things. Do it in a way that is more engaging, more interactive. Like you said, it sucks you in. It's not passive, right? It's active. You're actively involved and engaged. And that's the bread and butter. I mean, that's when I'm in the training and development space, and the use of gaming in the training and development space is huge, because if I'm just like standing up in front of a room of this passive audience of corporate, executives or whatever, it's pretty much a wasted time. You might get some things across, and they may, be impressed by you, and you'll say some interesting things, and maybe they'll remember some things, but that kind of a passive environment usually has almost no lasting effect. But rather when you engage people, when you actively involve them in gaming, like you're describing, this is one form of how you can do that. It can have a tremendous effect. So that's fantastic. Well, Devon, I'm noting the time. This has been just a fun conversation. We have a few minutes left together before we wrap up for today. I wanted to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, how they can connect with your team, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah. Jonathan, again, thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be chatting with you. Our team, we take about how we work very seriously, and like radical transparency, vulnerability. And so a lot of the stuff that you've talked about and you've engaged with, so it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you again for having me. But if anyone out there, they want to continue to connect, to find out more about me, or, start playing, you can find me on Twitter at Devon Chulick, DevonChulick. Just find me on Twitter. And if you want to find out about gaming for yourself, for your team, anything, you can just go to startplaying.games, and you could book a game group or a game master. And again, I think, at the end of the day, everything is about community. Everything I want to do is community centric, whether it be, the products I build, the people I work with, or in my current case, the products I build for the people I work with.
Fantastic. Thank you, Devon. It has been a real pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Devon and his team can do for you. Let's think about gaming and play and how we can incorporate that more into the workplace, more into our teams, more into our culture, because I think that will pay a lot of dividends and just have a really tremendous impact. This has been a fun conversation. Thank you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe, and that you have a great week.